All right, this week we bring you our fantasy football special, and for that we turn to our insider, CBS Sports fantasy guru, Adam Aizer. Adam, good to have you in town once again.
Let me put you on the spot.
Yeah?
Who's your number one pick?
Number one pick right now.
It's a tough question. Nobody can seem to agree on this.
I think I would probably have to go with AP.
Really?
I think that he could have a bounce-back season. But by the way, we got to get into this because we're going to get your sleepers, your duds. That's going to be in tomorrow's segment. But today, we kind of want to give a big picture overview of the draft and get draft strategy. And I'm glad you brought up running backs because, you know, in years past, it has always been you want to go running back with your first two picks. Is that changing now?
Definitely changing. There are fewer reliable running backs, and it's more of a passing league, obviously. There's very little chance I'm going running back, unless I can get two of my top 7 running backs who are probably in no particular order. Not Forte, he'd be just outside. So Peterson, Le'Veon Bell, Eddie Lacy, C.J. Anderson, Marshawn Lynch, Jeremy Hill, and then after that, you're talking Forte. If I can get 2 of those guys, I'll be fine with it. If not, give me at least 1 wide receiver.
You trust C.J. Anderson?
Yes, I do. I actually think he could be the number 1 player. I wouldn't take him number 1 overall. Gary Kubiak turns running backs into great fantasy.
I know, but you never know which running back that is. Last year, we thought the same thing with Monty Ball.
And that's a great point. And here's the thing with running backs. They're very unpredictable, which is why I would never take 2 with my first 2 picks unless it was 2 of those top 7. So you have to back them up with their backups. And I actually like Ronnie Hillman better than Monte Ball, but if I were going to draft C.J. Anderson, I wouldn't mind taking both of them late. And if I didn't draft C.J. Anderson, I wouldn't mind taking Ronnie Hillman late just in case.
So you're saying you like handcuffs as opposed to, say, backing up with other running backs in like rounds 6, 7, 8, earlier than maybe expected?
I like handcuffs when the handcuff can step in and be really good.
Like a turban or something.
If it's a Denver handcuff, right?
Okay.
This guy's going to be great. Whoever's the starting running back for Denver. You're not going to handcuff Doug Martin, because if he gets hurt, who do you want? I'm not necessarily going to handcuff Matt Forte, because I don't know if any backup running back in Chicago could be any good. So I only like handcuffs if I think that player has a chance to be a big difference maker for me.
I always feel like the fact that it's changing over to the NFL is running back by committee, it almost feels like our fantasy teams have to be running back by committee as well, and you have to build your roster out in that same way. But when is the earliest that you would look at taking a wide receiver? Could you take a wide receiver in the 5th pick?
Yeah, so the thing with fantasy football is that, to me, your draft strategy is so dependent on what pick you have, unless you're in an auction. But if you have a later pick, let's say a 12-team league, and you're picking 9th or later, I am not opposed at all to taking 2 wide receivers with my first 2 picks. Now, I have 8 wide receivers that I love. Antonio Brown, Demaryius Thomas, Dez Bryant, Julio Jones, Calvin Johnson, Odell Beckham, Jordy Nelson, and A.J. Green. And I'm almost there with T.Y. Hilton to be a 9th. I'd love to get 2 of those.
That's your top tier.
Top tier, and I need one. Unless a running back or Gronkowski falls to me in a position where I have to take them, I really want one of those 2 wide receivers. And even though it's the deepest position, those elite guys are so dependent week after week, it's really hard to find that in fantasy. So I could take 2 of them. If I have a late pick, I love taking 2 of them, and then probably my next 4 picks, or 3 of my next 4, are going to be running backs. If you go receiver early, you probably need to focus on building running back depth in the middle of your draft.
There's that mid-tier receivers that we've always had at the top, the Larry Fitzgeralds, V-Jacks, Victor Cruz. You know, these guys that are going like in rounds 7 through 10 who have the ability to go back to a number 1 receiver. Do you like that kind of assurance later in the draft?
That's the thing about receiver. The true value might be at the top of those elite guys or way toward the back of the draft. I mean, even a guy like Marcus Wheaton could come out of nowhere and have a big season. Brandon Coleman for New Orleans has been getting a lot of buzz, so you never know where it's going to come from. Victor Cruz is a really good guy to gamble on. Allen Robinson is a good guy to gamble on. Nelson Aguilar and some of the rookies. I like Devontae Parker. He's falling really late because he had a knee injury, but you don't need him immediately. So let Devontae Parker for the Dolphins kind of get into the swing of things, and maybe he could be a difference maker for you. You don't want to take too many wide receivers early because the value late is so good for your bench.
It's tough because, you know, we're watching these preseason games and we are diving into this. We're trying to evaluate these games.
Stop watching.
That's what I want. How do you evaluate these games?
A little bit. I mean, I was watching the Bills-Browns. Watching the Bills-Browns game the other day. That was so ugly.
Did you get paid to watch that?
No, I should have, though. I mean, somebody should pay me for that. It's hard to take away too much from preseason, and you could look at Andre Williams last year, right? Hall of Fame game, comes out, looks great against the Buffalo second-teamers, and I'm so excited. I think he's going to have a big year. And he actually ended up being okay in fantasy down the stretch because he got a lot of touchdowns, but he averaged in the low 3s.
He was a touchdown vulture, yeah.
Yeah, so you could make too much of it. What I look for in preseason games is role. Amir Abdullah is clearly going to play himself into a significant role in Detroit. Melvin Gordon needs to start producing a little bit more in the preseason so he doesn't go the Bishop Sankey way and not have a big enough role. But I'm not going to look too much at performance. There are just too many variables, and teams aren't really doing what they're going to be doing strategy-wise in the regular season.
I mean, we saw last night, the Jets' first-team offense stayed out there pretty much the entire
Did you get paid to watch that one?
Hey, actually, I did.
Yeah,
because I was working.
You're a lucky man.
But their first-team offense stays out there. Chris Ivory looked great on that 33-yard touchdown where he actually outran a defensive back to the end zone. But it was a second-team defense, so you could get fooled, is what you're saying, right?
You could absolutely get fooled, and actually the Jets.
But you're not fooled by Amir Abdullah.
I'm not going to sit here and say he's going to have a huge rookie season, but it's clear that with Joique Bell being hurt and Abdullah being a pretty early draft pick and having that kind of a debut in the preseason, yeah, he's going to have a role and he's worth drafting. I actually think Joique Bell is being downgraded too much because of the Abdullah hype, and he still might lead the team in rushing touchdowns and be a good value pick in about the 6th round.
The problem is Abdullah is going like around 5, and that's just a little bit too high. But
yeah, I've seen him in round 4, to your point.
My goodness.
So it's a little high for me.
How many drafts you in?
So far, I've done a bunch of mock drafts, 3 real drafts. I'll probably have 7 leagues, something like that.
Okay, so
it's a lot.
So in a perfect world, how do you like to build your team? Let's talk about overall building your team.
All right, perfect world. I want a top 7 running back and a top 8 wide receiver, or 2 top 8 wide receivers. Then I want Lamar Miller in the 3rd round. I love Lamar Miller this year. He's kind of my guy. I hope I can get him late in the 3rd round. If not him, Frank Gore, Mark Ingram, other guys going right around him. And then in the 4th round, I might take another running back, or maybe if Jordan Matthews falls. But your first 4 picks are going to be the meat of your team, 4 hopefully high upside players or really stable players. And usually it's at least 2 running backs. I haven't been taking a tight end early. I might be regretting it a little bit. If I can get Gronkowski, then maybe I get rid of that whole 2 receiver or wide receiver running back strategy in the first 2 rounds. That'd be the only variable. But perfect team, high upside rookie wide receivers late, like Devin Funchess now with Carolina, with Kelvin Benjamin out for the year. Devontae Parker I like. Tight end, I might take 2 of them, and one of them might be Antonio Gates, who's suspended 4 games.
Sure.
But it's such a horrible position that I have to feel like once he comes back, he's going to be certainly a must start. And quarterback, I wait. I wait.
Dude, I was going to say, I didn't hear any quarterbacks and all that. So you're going to wait until, what, 6, 7? To maybe start looking at quarterbacks?
Yeah, if a
so
guy...
now you're looking at like Matt Ryan, maybe Roethlisberger, maybe Manning.
Well, you never want to restrict yourself, right? So if Peyton Manning falls to the 4th or 5th round, sure, I'll take him. If Aaron Rodgers falls to the beginning of the 3rd round, I'll take him. Same with Andrew Luck. But it's not going to happen most likely in my drafts. So I do like the Romos, Roethlisbergers, Eli Mannings, Sam Bradford. I like a lot where he's going. Maybe he's your number 2 quarterback as a high-end backup, but look what Sanchez and Nick Foles did for fantasy owners. Bradford's a better player, so it's just the deepest position, so why would you waste an early pick on one?
Is there any draft etiquette as we're trying to educate people how to be better on draft day? I mean, tell me about what draft day looks like for you. What tabs do you have open on your computer? How much preparation do you do that particular day? And what draft etiquette has to be followed?
2 tabs that you must have open. The CBSSports.com, fantasynews.cbssports.com, the rankings page, either standard or PPR.
The new website is looking fantastic.
Thank you very much, And if you're in a half-point PPR league, I think you should lean towards standard scoring. So use those rankings. And the other page you should have open is ADP, average draft position. But don't be a slave to average draft position. It can vary a little bit. There are auto drafts that bump wide quarterbacks a little bit too high, and Kelvin Benjamin is still a 4th round pick right now. So things are going to change, but ADP gives you a good idea of where things go. The other thing you should do that I did for my draft last week, order a pizza. Very good idea. I think I had 6 of the 8 slices that night over 2 hours of drafting.
Are you just a pepperoni guy? Do you like to go supreme?
I wouldn't do anything that could give you a stomach ache, so I kept it just cheese. You don't want to get sick. You don't want to get sick during the draft. You want to be there from start to finish. Don't be the guy in the draft room that criticizes everyone else's pick. Nobody likes you, and you're probably wrong most of the time anyway.
Oh, he's only gaining 3.2 yards per carry in the last 10 games of the season.
So don't be that guy. And don't be the guy who's, oh, you took my pick. You can do that once. Maybe twice a draft. After that,
what does that mean?
Now you're just complaining.
Who cares?
Of course I took you. I had an earlier pick. Of course I took that guy.
Right, exactly.
I'm not giving him to you.
All right, so finally, Any tips on how you want to play the waiver wire here?
Yeah, sure. The waiver wire, don't overreact. Don't drop anybody that you think could have a big year early to take someone that might just be a flash in the pan. But good offenses are something I look at. So I think back to 2 years ago, Julius Thomas wasn't drafted in most leagues.
Right.
And he comes out, has a 3-touchdown game in the first week of the season. And probably we should have bought in him a little bit more. I think I might have pumped the brakes. I was like, well, he kind of came out of nowhere. They adjusted him in the second half. Bottom line, 2 double-digit touchdown seasons in a row because he played for Denver. So let's say Owen Daniels doesn't get drafted and he has a big week 1. Look for players in good offenses. Those are the ones that you're going to be able to rely on more. The waiver wire is very important. Your season does not end on draft day. I think my biggest tip would be DST. That's where you play the waiver wire the most. Take the Browns in week 1. They're playing the Jets. Sorry, Jets fans.
You're really driving that knife
yeah,
deep,
well,
aren't you?
It's hard to find a great matchup in week 1 because the ones that you really like are going to be DSTs that get drafted and are owned anyway. So the Browns are kind of the fringy waiver wire DST that I like for week 1, and then you can drop them if they have a bad matchup in week 2 and pick someone else up. As long as you're not in like a 16-team league or deeper, use the waiver wire to pick up your defense.
So let's talk sleepers and duds. All right, first off, when do you start to reach for sleepers? What round are you looking at?
Certainly depends on the position, but if you're going to reach for anyone, it should be a sleeper, someone you really like, and it has to be a situation where you say, there's no way I can get him with my next pick. So what you want to do is look at the roster grid, look at the rest of your draft and the other players that are drafting before you. Do they need a quarterback? Because if they do, then you're going to want to reach for that sleeper quarterback. Really, it's hard to say what round, maybe start round 6, round 7, depending on the position for sleepers.
Sleepers and duds and quarterbacks. Let's look them over right now.
All right, I like Eli Manning and Sam Bradford. Manning, after the bye week for the Giants last year, they kind of changed their identity, and he threw over 40 passes a game. He would have been among the leaders, if not the leader, in pass attempts throughout the entire season if he had done that on a weekly basis.
And with
for
that
16.
defense, they might need to throw a lot.
Yeah, forget it. Their defense is a mess. They are going to throw a lot, and that's the strength of their team. So I like Eli Manning. I think he has top 5 potential, second year in Ben McAdoo's offense. Sam Bradford, like I said yesterday, you look at what Nick Foles and Mark Sanchez have done in that offense. Fairly reliable in terms of Sanchez, very reliable for Foles. For fantasy owners, Bradford's a better player. They drafted Nelson Aguilar. I think he'll have a big year.
Your dud is going to be Tom Brady, though.
Well, so here's the thing.
How do you rank him, Tom Brady, as a dud? Are you seeing this because of the defenses that he's going to be facing in the division?
Well, yeah, look, there's the Jets who have Revis and Cromartie. There's Rex Ryan now with the Bills. He always does a good job. He's a good player, but since he's a great player, but for fantasy, he's a good quarterback, not necessarily great, except for about a 5-game stretch in the middle of the season last year. If you look at the last 2 seasons, once they got rid of Wes Welker, Aaron Hernandez no longer with the team, he just hasn't been great for fantasy. So I think where he's going now, around 12th, 13th overall at the position, is pretty good. He's a very, very good number 2 quarterback or a reliable number 1 quarterback, but we still don't know what the suspension is. So I don't usually draft Tom Brady. I don't think he's a bust. There's so many good quarterbacks. I don't see it with him.
Sleepers and duds on the running back side.
Well, Jeremy Hill, I think, is a great breakout. Lamar Miller, though, is the guy that I really want to target. He's got everything you want. 2 years out of 3, he's had a yards per carry of 4.9 or better. And the other year, he had a terrible offensive line. He's going to get a ton of touches. I can't see Miller not getting the goal line carries. I think he's going to catch enough passes. And he got 19 carries in each of his last 2 games last year. So I think Miller could have a huge year. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. And Andre Williams, this is a guy that is not going to pay dividends for you early, I don't think. I think it might take until week 5 or 6. But be patient with Andre Williams. This is one of the latest running backs you can get that I think could take over without a significant injury to the starter and be the best running back on the Giants.
And you want to stay away from the running backs?
I want to stay away from Matt Forte. I'm slightly concerned about Forte. I see bust potential. I don't hate Forte or anything like that, but 3.9 yards per carry last year, getting up there in his career and losing Mark Trestman. He's just not going to be on my team.
All right, as far as the receivers, who do you like?
Love
sleepers.
So Jordan Matthews is not exactly a sleeper. He's more of a breakout, but I love Jordan Matthews, getting him late 3rd round. 4th round would be awesome for Matthews. And then Nelson Aguilar, right on his team there, fills the Jordan Matthews role. One's an outside guy, one's a slot guy. But the bottom line is the number 1 receiver for Philadelphia under Chip Kelly, Jeremy Maclin and Sean Jackson, both those guys had their best seasons of their career with Chip Kelly. Now that's Matthews. The number 2 receiver last year was Matthews. He was really good. That's going to be Aguilar this year. I also like Devin Funchess. It's kind of an obvious one now. I think he won't be as good as Kelvin Benjamin last year, but he might get the most targets on the team. If not, he'll be second behind Greg Olsen, and there's a lot of production to replace. He'll be very solid.
And for the receivers that are overhyped right now that you might want to stay away from?
This is going to be a tough one. So I think at the end of the year, Martavis Bryant is going to be
He is getting
good.
a lot of hype right now.
Yeah, and he's going to be a top probably 24 to 30 receiver, which means you're starting him most weeks. But I avoid those types of receivers, and that's the boomer bust type, okay? So 1 week he might have 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. Next week, 25 yards. Total dud. They frustrate me. You can have them.
You'd rather have like an Andre Johnson with the Colts.
Yeah.
You know he's going to give you 4 catches for 50 yards each week. You know for sure he's
I'd like
going to
a little more than that, but yes.
That's a pretty bad week.
Dependability is really important for me when I'm talking about guys that I'm not necessarily going to start every week. I want a guy that I know. Because, look, Roethlisberger, right? He had 2 6-touchdown games last year. He might have been on your bench.
Yeah.
So I like consistency, and that really ties in more with Martavis Bryant than Roethlisberger. You just never know what you're going to get from him. I like guys who catch more passes.
Well, great names. You gave us good advice in the baseball fantasy segment we did earlier this year.
Thank you.
So now we're hoping that you come through once again.
Now the pressure's on.
Yeah, now it's all on. You can listen to Adam Aizer on Fantasy Football Today, the podcast on iTunes. I will be subscribing to that one, definitely.
Thank you.
Adam Aizer, good to see you once again. Thanks so much for all your insights, man.
Let's go win a league.